Hello, family. My name is Des. Welcome to A Level Law. And today we're going to be looking at the relationship between law and morality. Let's get right in. Okay, family, welcome back. So, when we talk about law, what we're really asking is what should people be allowed to do and what should they not do? What should they not be allowed to do? But here's the big question. How do we decide what is right and what is wrong? How do we say this is right and this is wrong? How do we decide that? That is where morality comes right in. Now, the Oxford Dictionary defines morality as a system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a society or an individual. Now, I understand that's very academic, right? So let's break it down. So, morality is about what people believe they ought to do. Morality is what people believe they should do. It draws the line between behavior that is acceptable and unacceptable. So, morality, it is about what people feel is right, what they think is right, what they think is wrong. And it is what delineates, it's what puts a boundary or a line between behavior that we say is acceptable and is unacceptable. So morality can be personal, right? Your own code of conduct. Or it can be collective, what the society as a whole believes is right and wrong. So, for example, personally, you might believe that lying is always wrong. That's your own code of conduct. Collectively, society may agree that theft is always wrong. That's collective morality. Now, traditionally, morality has often come from religion. So, in Christianity, the 10 Commandments, like do not kill, do not steal, form a clear moral code. In Islam, the Quran sets out rules guiding everything from family life to business dealing. It's also forming a clear moral code, what they ought to do and ought not to do. So even if someone isn't religious, many moral ideas in the UK, such as fairness, honesty, and respect for life, they still reflect centuries of religious influence. So morality touches nearly every part of our lives. Relationships. You must be loyal. You must be honest. You must be respectful. It goes to touch even money and property. Don't steal. Don't cheat. It goes on to influence life and death issues like euthanasia, which means deliberately ending someone's life to relieve them of suffering. So some see it as compassionate and others see it as morally wrong, right? So it depends on what you personally, your own moral code, and what society's moral code says about that topic. So you see later on we'll deal with cases where parents kill their end the lives of their children because they feel their children are in so much pain, and ending their lives would be good for them rather than for them to keep on living and they're suffering. I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that's moral or that's immoral? Do you think that's right or it's wrong? But this is where the issues of morality come into. So morality will even get into our social behavior, right? For example, drinking and driving, drug use, right? But here's the challenge. Like I've already highlighted, morality is not always black and white. It's not always clear what people agree is right or is wrong. So, for example, in the issues of a mother ending their child's life because the child is in so much pain, and the mother feels like if she ends the child's life, she would have taken the child out of pain. Do you think it's moral? Some people will say it's moral. Some people will say it's not moral. So you see, morality is not always black and white. It can be difficult. So the philosopher Mary Warnock argued that what one society sees as a moral issue, another may see as simply a matter of taste. Right? So in one culture, people can say, or in one group of people, a particular thing can be completely immoral, but put it in another different culture, in another different setting, it can be just an issue of taste, whether I like it or not necessarily whether it's right or wrong. So, for example, 50 years ago in the UK, homosexuality was seen as immoral and it was even illegal, right? So, at that time, with in that culture and the people who were there, homosexuality was immoral and was even illegal. But today, society largely accepts it as normal, and the law reflects that through same sex marriage and anti discrimination protections. Now, now, even up to now, you see that there are even countries, especially in Africa, that in fact most of Africa does not support same-sex marriages or homosexuality. In fact, in a lot of African countries, it's illegal. But you go to Europe, you go to America, you see that in another part of the world, homosexuality is even encouraged in some situations. So you see that morality sometimes amongst people, some people might look at one thing and say this is immoral, and other people might look at it and say it is not moral. So as society changes, morality changes too. Let's look at abortion. At once it was taboo, but now it is legally permitted under certain conditions. Drink driving, it was once seen as socially acceptable. People would just say, no, just one more won't hurt, and then they would drink and then they would drive. But now it's heavily stigmatized and strictly punished. Climate change, it was once seen as just a scientific issue. Now it is widely viewed as a moral responsibility to future generations, that we should take care of our planet because our future generations would depend on the decisions that we are making today about the environment that they are going to inherit from us. Now, the sociologist Emily Durkheim explained why morality becomes less shared in modern societies. Now, if you look right now, you're going to realize that if you are living in Britain, for example, what you're going to realize is you might go in a certain family or in a certain group or a certain community, and one thing is not acceptable, it's immoral, right? And you go to another community, another group of families or another family, that thing is accepted. And so our morality is becoming less shared, less and less and less shared. And the sociologist Emily explains why modern society have less shared morality. Think of it, 1,000 years ago, right? People who used to live in tribes and even in kingdoms, and what is moral was generally accepted by everyone, right? Homosexuality, for example, back then, in most societies, it was considered as immoral. Uh, Abortion was considered as immoral. Things like that were considered as immoral. And they would be generally accepted by everyone that this kind of behavior is immoral. But now, everyone believes differently, right? People believe, maybe not necessarily everyone in the strict sense of that word, but now people believe differently. They think what is moral and immoral. It people just believe. Some people believe it is immoral. Some people believe it's in between. Some people say it's not moral. Some people say it's moral. What people believe about morality has become different, and the morality is less shared now. And why is that? So the sociologist Emily said, because work is more specialized, so people live very different lifestyles, right? Back then, everyone was probably going to the fields, they were going to hunt, everyone was doing almost everything, right? But now, because work is specialized, so you have one group of people who just do computers. They don't farm, they don't cook, they don't do anything else. All they do is they just work on their computers, and that's it. The people who just do music, that's all they do. And so because people no longer meet, right? They people back then, everyone was doing almost everything, so everything was almost shared. But now everyone is specialized. Someone focuses on content creation, someone focuses on teaching like I do, someone focuses on practicing law like I do as well. So everyone focuses on a different aspect of work and life. And so our lives become less shared. And so our morality becomes less shared as well, because as things develop and as things change, there's no opportunity to share because we don't spend time together. If I'm just in this field, I just focus on that one. Number two, societies are more ethnically diverse with different traditions and different values. Back then, people were, like I said, used to live in tribes. So Irish people just used to stay with Irish people. Shona people just used to stay with Shona people. And Zulu people just used to stay with Zulu people. But now we've become ethnically diverse. So if you go into Britain, you're going to realize that England has people from everywhere, right? So everyone is going to come there with their own morality, with their own code of ethics, with what they think is right and wrong, depending on where they come from. And so at the end of the day, the morality is less and less and less and less shared as people mix and mix and mix and mix. Number three is the influence of religion has faded. Generally, we say that we can say the influence of religion has faded, and it is true. But we are also seeing, which is another separate subject, a rise in religion, a rise in people going back to religion. But generally, uh, maybe comparing with old time, the influence of religion has faded. And so, because religion was this institution or this thing that gave morality to everyone, now because the influence of religion has faded, people just do as they please. They do what they want. And that's exactly what we see in the UK today, a multicultural society with multiple moral outlooks. So now, how does law fit in? We're talking about morality, but how does the law fit in when we talk about morality? Criminal law often directly mirrors morality. So criminal law, the things that we consider as crimes, are often the exact thing that we also believe as a society are morally wrong. So theft is both illegal and it's seen as immoral. Violence during theft is punished even more harshly because society condemns it as doubly wrong, right? So you see that a lot of things that we consider as crimes are generally also morally wrong. So the law is sort of feeding from morality. In civil law also has moral undertones. Negligence law is based on the moral idea that you shouldn't cause harm through carelessness. So someone who's negligent, uh, they're just careless, right? If you are careless and you cause someone's harm, that is generally morally considered as wrong, that because you shouldn't be careless. So you can see how morality is even expressed in civil law, in that negligence, carelessness, what we already in terms of morality consider to be immoral, is also seen as wrong under civil law, and you're supposed to pay for damages. If you do something negligently and you hurt someone, you're supposed to pay them to repair whatever you damaged, or to compensate them for the damage or the pain that you caused them. Now, let's even look in terms of contract law. It reflects the moral expectation that people should keep their promises, right? There's a moral expectation that we should keep our promises, and we should keep our promises, really, right? And contract law reflects that moral expectation. Hey, if this is adding any value to you, I want you to do me a little favor. Hit that subscribe button, click that like button, and share. Yeah, I'm waiting for you to share and subscribe. Yeah, do it now. Thank you. Let's get back into the video. So I'll give you an example of how the law reflects morality. So, for example, consumer protection laws. So, if a big company takes advantage of consumers, right, the law steps in to make things fairer. This is partly about law, but also about society's moral sense that exploiting the weak is wrong, right? So, as a society, morally, we generally believe that taking advantage and exploiting those who are weak is wrong. So, when a big company does something, right, the law that hurts the consumers who are not in a position to fight against the big company because they need the things that the big company is producing, right? If the big company isn't fair, the law will come in to support the consumer, to make things fair for the consumer, because morally we believe that we must not exploit those who are weak, in this case, the consumers. Now, we want to look at the tension between law and morality. Now, the tricky part is that law and morality don't always move at the same pace. Sometimes public morality changes first and then the law lags behind. Other times, the law changes first and public opinion catches up later. So, let me give you an example of COVID-19, right? This pandemic that hit the world in 2020, right? So when COVID hit in 2020, governments had to make fast legal decisions, lockdowns, border controls, vaccine priority lists, right? But those laws were built on moral judgments, right? They were built really on moral judgments. So, for example, when it came to vaccines, who should get the vaccine first? Who should be protected first? Most countries prioritize the elderly and healthcare workers based on the moral idea of protecting the most vulnerable. That the elderly were the most vulnerable, right? And the healthcare workers who were working with the patients were also the most vulnerable. So it made law based on morality that those who are most vulnerable should be protected first. What about the question of whose freedom should be restricted? Australia and New Zealand decided it was morally right to restrict movement to save lives, while South Korea chose to protect freedom of movement, but use surveillance and contact tracing instead. So you see that these countries were applying morality. So here, morality went first. Societies debated what was right, and then government turned those moral decisions into law. So society determined what was right, and then the government moved and made those decisions, those determinations, they made them law. Sometimes, like I said, morality changes and the law catches up, and sometimes the law changes and then morality will catch up. So imagine if there was no common ground about right and wrong during COVID, where everyone had their own idea of right and wrong, and everyone had the idea of what is moral and immoral, right? Some people are demanding lockdowns, others are demanding absolute freedom, others are arguing to protect only the young. So without a shared morality, society would have splintered into chaos. That's why the law often tries to reflect morality, right? It tries to say, what do we believe as a society? Let's put that into law. So morality gives a clear framework, right? And enforcement to the shared values that we have. Sometimes the law changes first and morality catches up, and sometimes morality changes first and the law catches up. So, for example, same-sex marriage, morality changed first and then the law catched up. It followed. But looking at smoking bans, right? Smoking in public, right? The law changed first and then morality caught up later. The law said you shouldn't smoke. And people generally at first were like, why? Right? But over time, it got accepted as morally right. And now people who are smoking in places that they're not supposed to be smoking are seen as doing something immoral, something that is hurting the community, hurting everyone else around. Now, let's look at summary. What is morality? Morality, it is about values, about right and wrong. It can be personal, collective, religious, or even secular. Morality changes with society. It is not always black and white. Law and morality overlap, especially in criminal law. Sometimes morality leads, and sometimes the law leads and morality follows. In crises like COVID-19, governments turn to moral debates into law to protect society. And finally, without shared morality, society risks breaking apart, which is why laws play a vital role in holding it together. Okay, family, this is the end of the class on the relationship between law and morality. If this is adding any value to you, I'm going to ask you to do me one little favor, to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment, ask a question if you have any questions. I can't wait to hear from you guys. And if you want to be part of our online school, if you want to learn A-level law, please make use of the details in the description of the channel below. But as always, until next time, bye.